New Year's Eve 2022, in the quiet and beautiful coastal community of Cohasset, 22 miles southeast of Boston, the Walshes hosted dinner and drinks to ring in the new year. It was a standard New Year's Eve party. That is, they ate, toasted, celebrated, and called it a night sometime after midnight. But beneath the rosy exterior image of the well-educated, wealthy, and happy couple was a hidden tension. A husband with a sketchy past, scattered with psychological issues, criminal activity, and violent threats. Meanwhile, his bubbly, smart, successful wife and mother to their children excelled in her career. That success may well have fed her partner's resentment. That is, until the early morning hours of New Year's Day 2023, the last time that Ana Walshe would be seen alive. Hi everyone, I'm Kevin and this is Just Thought Lounge. JTL is the true crime channel that delivers serious, well-balanced coverage of the cases that really make you think. Today we're taking a look at a case that has drawn international attention over the past few weeks. It is an ongoing investigation, but already so much has been brought to light. Warning signs, revelations from family and friends, shocking details, and potentially damning evidence. Let's take a look. Serbian-born Ana Walshe met her future husband Brian in 2008 at the Wheatley Hotel in Lenox, where she worked as the reservation manager. At the time, Ana was married to her first husband, Mark Nip. They divorced several years later, in 2014. Ana had built a successful career in hospitality. Although she had studied French language and literature at Belgrade University, she went on to earn a master's certificate in hospitality management from Cornell, and moved through multiple director-level positions at large hospitality firms. By early 2022, Ana had accepted a role as operations director at Tishman Speyer in Washington, D.C. She had moved on in her romantic life as well, marrying Brian Walshe in 2015 and having 3 boys aged between 2 and 6 years old. Ana was the family's main breadwinner. Her husband was an Ivy League graduate as well. Brian had been given the opportunity to attend excellent universities: Carnegie Mellon, the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, Northeastern University, and the JFK School of Government at Harvard. But despite his leg up in life, Brian had taken a bit of a fall from grace when he encountered some legal trouble. In 2021, Brian was compelled to plead guilty to fraud charges linked to a series of mildly elaborate cons selling fake artwork. Under home confinement, Brian was restricted to the family house with limited approvals to make functional trips from the house to take the children to school or run errands. Ana, however, was always on the move, splitting her time between the family home in Massachusetts and a second house recently purchased in DC. Ana was a frequent flyer between Boston's Logan Airport and Ronald Reagan National Airport. Ana was adored by her friends and coworkers alike.
She's just so personable. She lights up a room. She's so passionate and fun and joyful. Really just someone who you want to get to know immediately. And she's so interested in everyone and everything. And just a really beautiful, wonderful, passionate, joyful woman.
That New Year's Eve, friend of the couple, Jem Mutlu, joined the Walshes to ring in the new year.
Brian had cooked an elaborate meal for us, and we hugged and celebrated and toasted, and just what you do over New Year's, and there was a lot of looking forward to the new year.
According to Brian, the next morning, New Year's Day, January 1st, Ana got ready and kissed him goodbye and told him to go back to sleep. She usually took an Uber, Lyft, or taxi to the airport and left between 6 and 7 a.m. Ana had booked a flight to DC to return to work in a couple days, on January 3rd. But Brian said that when she woke him on New Year's Day, she said there had been a work emergency, which required her to fly out earlier than originally planned. However, Ana did not show up at the airport that morning. Indeed, Ana did not board the original flight on January 3rd either. By the 4th of January, the Wednesday, it was her employer in Washington that contacted police back in Massachusetts to report her missing. Evidently, Brian also made a report at about the same time. No one had heard from Ana since the early morning of January 1st. Brian Walshe had also been calling his wife's friends. Perhaps one of them had heard from her.
Good afternoon. It's Brian Walshe. I hope all is going well. I was just reaching out to basically everybody I could. Ana hasn't been in touch for a few days. Do you know anyone that might have had contact with her? Calling everyone. So sorry to bother you. Sure, everything's fine.
On the 5th of January, the Cohasset Police Department reached out to the public for any potentially useful information or any sighting of the 39-year-old mother.
Cohasset police detectives, along with detectives from the Massachusetts State Police, as well as detectives from the towns of Hingham, Hull, Norwell, and Situate. With that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Are there suspicious circumstances here that you're concerned about?
At this point, it's a missing person investigation. We're just trying to locate Anna and get her home safely. Whether we have nothing to support anything suspicious or criminal. Reported missing Wednesday. Simultaneously, we received simultaneous reports from her employer in Washington, D.C., as well as her husband, who lives here in Cohasset.
Was she supposed to get on a plane to go to Washington, D.C.? Was that why she would have left the house?
It was reported that she was that she took a ride share from her home in Cohasset to Logan Airport to board a plane to go to Reagan International Airport in D.C.
Police would later confirm that there was no evidence to indicate that Ana had taken a rideshare to Logan Airport. Uber, Lyft, and local taxi companies had no record of a pickup at her address, nor any drivers reporting an off-the-books trip. Reportedly, a Ring camera system at the home was also checked. There was no sign of Ana leaving. Throughout January 6th and 7th, law enforcement organized a search of the woods about a mile from Ana's home. The area was combed for any trace of what may have happened. Officials said that 20 troopers from a specialized search and rescue were joined by 3 police K-9 teams and a police helicopter. State police divers also searched a small stream and drained the home's swimming pool. But after 2 full days, the state police announced that they would not be returning for a third. After exhaustive efforts of the woodland, they had not turned up any leads. On the day Ana disappeared, the 1st of January, life had proceeded as usual at the Walshe household, according to Brian. The babysitter arrived in the afternoon. Brian then left home to get groceries at about 3 and then to see his mother in Swampscott, which is about an hour's drive. Curiously, Brian was without his cell phone when he left the house that day. It was lost the night before, he said. Without his phone for GPS, Brian got lost. This meant he was out much later than intended that afternoon. Brian told police that he left his mother's home within about 15 minutes of arriving in order to run errands for her at 2 shops, Whole Foods and CVS. After his shopping was complete, Brian was lost for a time, maybe 30 minutes. He eventually returned home to Cohasset at about 8 p.m. It took a few days for investigators to track down and verify Brian's movements, including driving his route to Swampscott and watching through hours of video surveillance at the Whole Foods and CVS to verify his presence there. And what they found was nothing. Brian Walshe did not appear on camera in either shop. Brian's confident and detailed itinerary for the first day his wife was missing was a lie. With the evidence of Brian's deceitfulness in hand, the Cohasset police were able to arrest him on charges of misleading a criminal investigation.
Your Honor, the charge before the court right now, the defendant is charged under the intimidation, that being misleading the police in the course of an investigation. The investigation was into the missing person of Ana Walshe. Surveillance was checked by several police during this time frame. These statements caused a lot of delay as part of the investigation, as police now were focusing on the North Shore.
Day 8 after Ana's disappearance, the family home in Cohasset was searched, initially with Brian's consent, and items removed. Officers loaded a Volvo SUV onto the back of a truck, while others searched the grounds of the property. Unlike the woodland search, the house yielded crucial clues. In the basement, law enforcement found bloodstains and a damaged, bloody knife. With Brian still in custody, police began retrieving the data from his cell phone. It hadn't been completely lost, apparently. One of his boys must have taken it during the New Year's Eve party and hidden it away, Brian said. He located it later under one of the children's pillows. Data from the phone showed that Brian traveled to multiple areas that he had not mentioned. Indeed, locations that were not approved under the conditions of his probation. Meanwhile, data from Ana's cell phone showed it pinged in the area of their Cohasset home on both January 1st, when she was meant to have left, and again, the next day. In 2011, Brian Walshe was living in South Korea. He had traveled there for a friend's wedding and decided to stay on. Living with this old friend, one from his undergraduate days at Carnegie Mellon, Brian had spotted an opportunity to be of some assistance. His friend's family possessed a notable art collection and had a handful of pieces they wished to sell. Brian was well-spoken, educated, and came from generational wealth. He seemed to possess key qualities that would be useful in the art world. His friend trusted him with a few pieces. One was a small Chinese statuette, one a Keith Haring sketch, and two were well-known and quite highly valued Andy Warhol paintings. In 1978 to 79, Warhol painted numerous abstract paintings of various sizes known as the Shadows. There were over 100 of them in the series. In 2011, Brian was entrusted with two of these. They were thought to hold a market value of close to $250,000 US at the time. The second was a piece from the dollar sign. When Warhol created this series, he said of his inspiration, "Big-time art is big-time money." This was certainly a sentiment that Brian Walshe would agree with. Once Brian had possession of the artwork, he immediately set out to locate buyers, but not on the behalf of his friend. In his diary at the time, he recorded his real intentions, to pocket the money for himself. He wrote, "I have a plan for the art. Need to get off with some of the good pieces. Hope I can make it through. This one is going to be bumpy." Over the next 5 years, Brian managed to sell the Warhol paintings repeatedly to multiple buyers around the world. Beginning in 2011, Brian consigned both Warhols to Christie's auction house in New York. He managed to sell the dollar sign for about $40,000, but not the Shadows. Later that same year, he employed a forger to make several copies of these paintings, claiming that he required the copies for insurance purposes. Then, he set off selling them as originals. A subsequent FBI investigation tracked down some, though admittedly not all of these sales. In September 2015, for example, Brian entered into a contract to sell the Shadows to an art consultant in Paris, France, for $145,000 US. By the next year, he was found to have paid yet another forger to make additional copies of the Shadows, providing a set of photos to work from. This time, he did not provide the forger with the originals. The FBI suspected this was because by that time, he had already sold them. Later that year, these paintings also appeared on eBay. Brian listed them for $100,000, claiming that they were from his private collection. This time, however, he sold them to an art dealer based in California, a man named Ron Rivlin, who specialized in Warhol. Ron oversaw one of the most extensive Andy Warhol collections and is an expert in the field. Ron paid Brian $80,000 for the Shadows, after being shown online convincing documentation of their authenticity. Brian had cleverly used paperwork provided by other buyers and potential buyers like Christie's in New York and the Gagosian Gallery to mimic paperwork assigning the paintings the proper provenance. And it worked, at least at first. Ron Rivlin had sent his assistant to retrieve the paintings from Brian.
They met at the Four Seasons Hotel in the lobby, and he treated her to lunch. Totally legit. They were on my desk in my gallery the next morning when I arrived, and I knew immediately. I could see that the paint was fresh. I tore the back paper off the frame, the stretcher bar, and saw underneath that the canvas wasn't aged. I've bought bought over 1,000 Andy Warhol artworks, and he was the one and only guy who got one pass.
After a lot of chasing, Ron managed to recoup $30,000 of his $80,000 purchase. But after that, the con man could no longer be reached.
She seemed like kind of scared by the whole thing and said there's no way my husband would have done something like this. And she was the one who got Brian to call me back and work out a resolution. She was very kind and respectful, and I picked up on her being kind of scared by an accusation from my side.
The FBI tracked these funds to Brian's credit card, where his debts for extensive travel and restaurants had become exorbitant. Brian cut ties with his friend in South Korea, and the original artworks have not been returned to them. The state asserted that Brian was motivated by greed. He wished to sustain his lavish lifestyle. After obtaining $145,000 in Paris, for example, Brian's credit card receipts show that he and his wife, Ana, indulged in a shopping trip at Prada. The art dealer who discovered the fraud, after 5 years and an unknown number of cons, highlighted the skills and parts of his background that made Brian manipulative. Strong communication skills, likability, his apparent wealth, including the address of a multi-million-dollar home.
He was very calculated, almost genius about how he went about things.
Brian Walshe likely agreed with another of Warhol's famous quotes: "Art is what you can get away with." The FBI concluded that Brian repeatedly sold the fake shadows paintings and at least twice sold the dollar sign. Friends, or rather former friends of Brian's, told the FBI that he had repeatedly stolen from them. A college friend reported that Brian borrowed $500,000 and never repaid it. Another friend reported that Brian would attend elaborate, expensive dinners and ask his friends to pay for them. Worse still was the extended legal battle that followed the death of his father, Dr. Thomas Walshe. By the time of his death in 2018, he had been estranged from his son for almost 10 years.
The elder Walshe and his son had been estranged for years after Brian Walshe absconded with almost $1 million from Dr. Thomas Walshe. Court records also say because of the alleged theft, it required Dr. Thomas Walshe to continue working past the age at which he had wished to retire, as a significant amount of his savings were stolen and never returned.
He bequeathed to Brian only his best wishes and nothing else from his estate. Being cut off from his father's will was unacceptable to Brian, who fought for the estate, claiming, seemingly without irony, that his father's will had been forged. In court documents from this legal battle, individuals close to the Walshe family described Brian as an angry and violent person. Brian had received treatment at Austin Riggs Psychiatric Center in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, before being discharged a few years ago. The same family friend who spoke of Brian's anger issues also claimed that the con man had been formally diagnosed as a sociopath.
As Brian got older, he sort of lost touch with how people make it in the world and just assumed a mantle of entitlement. There were signs he was a con artist. There was more than signs. There was ample examples. But there was never a mean streak. There was never even an angry stare.
Did any of Brian's behavior strike me in any way as off-key? Nothing.
In 2021, Brian pleaded guilty to 3 federal fraud charges and had been on house arrest and monitoring as he awaited sentencing. In January 2023, he was free on probation but in home confinement with restrictions placed upon his movements. Brian was allotted a 2.5-hour period on weekdays between 8 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. to drop off his children at school. Monday, January 2nd was a holiday. The schools were closed, but Brian was out and about. Videos in a Home Depot in Rockland captured Brian that morning, the day of his wife's disappearance, wearing a black surgical mask and blue surgical gloves. That video has yet to be released. Video at a juice bar earlier that morning, however, captured him without his mask and gloves. According to police reports at the Home Depot in Rockland, Brian purchased $450 in cleaning supplies, including mops, a bucket, tarps, and various kinds of tape. He paid in cash. This was 2 days prior to the approved leave time that Brian had been granted for errands and shopping. Under the conditions of his probation, these errands were to take place between 11 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. on Wednesday. But the day after his wife was last seen alive, Brian needed an abundance of cleaning supplies immediately. He then lied about his whereabouts to the police. Investigators placed crime scene tape around dumpsters near the home of Brian's mother in Swampscott. They also searched a garbage collection transfer facility station in nearby Peabody. The results of these searches removed much of the hope held out by those close to Ana, who wished desperately for an unlikely but happy resolution to her disappearance. In the Swampscott site, police located bloody towels and other items consistent with those purchased by Brian at the Home Depot only days before. At the Peabody site, they found a hacksaw, torn-up cloth material, blood, a hatchet, a rug, and cleaning supplies in trash bags. Law enforcement had reported their initial intentions to test blood samples against Walsh family members in an effort to match DNA. Although already in custody for misleading this investigation, Brian Walsh was then further charged with the murder of his wife. Norfolk District Attorney Michael Morrissey made a public announcement.
Early in this investigation, the police developed probable cause to believe that her husband, Brian Walsh, age 47, had misled police investigators on material matters important to the search for Ana Walshe. He has pled not guilty to those charges and is currently being held at the Norfolk County House of Correction. The continued investigation has now allowed police to obtain an arrest warrant charging Brian Walsh with the murder of his wife.
The state's case was laid out at a pretrial hearing for the murder charges. During this hearing, for the first time, the public heard details of the data retrieved from Brian's elusive cell phone, and quite a few from his son's iPad. Brian's search history is telling. Indeed, it tells a gruesome narrative of a man seeking to dispose of a body, step by step, including an oddly specific search for how to dispose of a 115-pound woman's body.
At 4:55 a.m. on January 1st, he searched how long before a body starts to smell. At 4:58 a.m., how to stop a body from decomposing. At 5:20 a.m., he searched how to embalm a body. At 5:47 a.m., 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. At 6:25 a.m. on the 1st, how long for someone to be missing to inherit. At 6:34 a.m. on the 1st, can you throw away body parts? At 9:29 a.m., what does formaldehyde do? At 9:34 a.m. on the 1st, how long does DNA last? At 9:59 a.m., can identification be made on partial remains? At 11:34 a.m., dismemberment and the best ways to dispose of a body. At 11:44, how to clean blood from wooden floor. At 11:56 on the 1st, luminol to detect blood. At 1:08, what happens when you put body parts in ammonia? At 1:21 p.m., is it better to throw crime scene clothes away or wash them? There was also information gained from the defendant's phone which showed on January 2nd he was at Home Goods in Norwell where he purchased 3 rugs. There were also more Google searches on January 2nd. At 12:45 p.m., hacksaw best tool to dismember. At 1:10 p.m., can you be charged with murder without a body? At 1:14 p.m., can you identify a body with broken teeth?
Amongst Brian's searches was also a key insight into what remained ambiguous to this point: his motive. On December 27, 2022, Brian had searched, what's the best state to divorce? There were signs that the marriage could have been in trouble. A friend close to Ana painted a domestic picture of the Walshes as one where Ana worked long hours at her high-powered job at an exclusive real estate agency, while Brian stayed at home doing chores. Ana had reportedly asked her mother to visit her from Serbia, a sign that she may be reaching out for emotional support. Further supporting this was Ana's presence on social media. Ana appeared several times on her Instagram throughout 2022, not wearing her wedding ring. The most recent time she was pictured without it was 2 weeks before her disappearance, when she posed with Paul Wharton, a British gin entrepreneur, at his book signing in Washington, D.C.
Out to her mother in Serbia on December 25th, Christmas Day. The text read, quote, "Please, Mama, come tomorrow." A request her mother denied.
There is also reason to suspect that Brian was more interested in his wife's small fortune than remaining her husband. In the days before her disappearance, he searched online for the estimated amount of time one needs to wait to gain an inheritance. Since 2018, Ana had sold at least 4 properties worth more than $2.7 million. Ana held a valuable real estate portfolio totaling an estimated $1.8 million. This includes 2 apartments in Lynn, Massachusetts, a row house in Baltimore, and a 2,500 square foot home in DC. Her husband's name does not appear as an owner or co-owner on any of these properties. The state of Massachusetts believes that Brian wanted out of his marriage and to retain his wife's wealth.
Rather than divorce, it is believed that Brian Walsh dismembered Ana Walshe and discarded her body.
The state's case against Brian Walsh for the murder of his wife appears to be a strong one, despite the failed efforts of search teams to locate her. Nearly a decade before Ana Walshe went missing, she made a report to police about the man who would later become her husband. She reported that he threatened to kill her and a friend. Ana, then still Ana Nip, reported this death threat back in 2014, telling police that Brian said over the phone he was going to kill them both while she still lived in Washington, D.C. The case was later closed when Ana refused to cooperate in the prosecution. She went on to marry Brian the next year and have 3 children. At the time of publishing, the search for Ana continues. In what was likely one of her final communications, Ana left a note to her conman husband on a champagne box that appears to have been left unopened after the New Year's Eve party, the last night she was seen alive. Ana wrote, "Wow, 2022, what a year, and yet we are still here and together. Let's make 2023 the best one yet. We are the authors of our lives. Courage, love, perseverance, compassion, and joy. Love, Ana." The couple's 3 children are said to be in the custody of the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families, but several local families have also offered to take them in so that they can remain together. That is the story so far of the disappearance of Ana Walshe and the case against her conman husband, Brian Walsh. Thanks for watching. I'm Kevin. This is Just Thought Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.